Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. On the show today, Daniel Matallana. So Daniel I met at the Integral Conference. He's a Colombian philosopher, dance therapist, and a meditation teacher, joining us today from Qatar. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
How did you get interested in the body? What was your journey into this?
Well, I was born in Colombia, and I guess as a culture, I was always very much in my body, surrounded by music. And even though I was born in Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia, high up in the mountains, I also spent some time as a child in the jungle in a very remote part of Colombia where my dad lives. So I had the chance. I was very lucky to, just swim around in the rivers and be kind of in tune with my own body and the kind of the different types of Colombian folk music and dance. And then a bit later on, I trained as a dancer, and I founded a contemporary dance company in Colombia with some friends. I lived in Brazil for a while I studied dance, and different explorations and inquiries led me to train as a dance psychotherapist in London at Goldsmiths. And now I am in the Middle East, kind of integrating all those experiences and offering them in a culture which is slightly disembodied. So bring that medicine of movement.
Well, I think we're definitely going to talk about culture today. This is one of the main themes of the podcast. We have people on from all over the world. We had a Mexican guy on, but I don't think we've had any South Americans on. I've lived in Brazil. I had a Colombian partner for a while. I've had a kind of love affair with South America generally through tango and various other practices. And there does seem to be in many parts, I know it's a big place, but there does seem to be a different relationship to the body in Colombia and the Middle East in South America than you'll find in Northern Europe, Western Europe, the Middle East, and North America. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, that's a great question because I've had the chance to live in different countries, different continents, and even in South America, I'd say, I don't know, the way Brazilians relate to the body is quite different from the way Colombians do. I guess in Brazil, it's just out there and everything's kind of hyper sexualized, and just the beach, the culture itself kind of calls for that very direct relationship to the body. Whereas in Colombia, it's a bit more mild, I guess. It's not that full on. Also, you have mountains, so it's a bit colder in some regions, but it's definitely a very touchy-feely culture. And when I moved to the UK, I got depressed because, I just needed my daily dose of human touch and connection. In the Middle East now, it's on the other side of the spectrum. People just barely touch each other, and I mean, it's slowly opening up, and especially Qatar, I guess. I'd say it's the most liberal country in this region, but still, they're kind of just opening up to other ways of approaching and being in the body.
Yeah, I remember when I met you at this conference in Hungary, and you guys listening can't see Daniel, but he's a sort of slinky, beautiful cat-like creature. I hope that's okay to describe you that way, Daniel.
I thank you. I like your praise, and I remember we met in the jacuzzi, if I'm not wrong. And so, it was a very pleasant and fluid encounter.
And I'm now wondering how that slinkiness goes down in the Middle East. Like, what do they make of you? I mean, you're similar sort of color to them people there, but you're an entirely different way of being.
Yeah, it's a bit puzzling for them, I guess, because I kind of look, I shave my head, so I kind of look like a monk, even though I'm not a monk. I'm just a regular kind of person. And so I have some kind of Asian traits, you could say. Some people here think I'm kind of Thai or Filipino or Cambodian, I don't know. And then, I don't know, they meet me in one of my yoga or dance classes, and it's a bit puzzling for them to see this, hold on, it's kind of this rock and roll monk, kind of Latin dude. So I think it's great for people to just blow up all those fixed identities and know that you can. I mean, I've also met local Qataris who are very devoted to their culture and their religion, but at the same time super open to dance and exploration and fitness and martial arts, and and just getting down and sweaty. So slowly opening up and just transcending those identities.
So there's a sort of monk archetype, and then there's the sort of sexy South American archetype, and they're kind of colliding in you a little bit, those two, aren't they?
Yeah, you could say so. And I'm all about integrating all those different aspects and polarities. I mean, I don't really identify myself with Colombia. I mean, I've been away for 5 or 6 years now, and I don't identify myself with, I don't know, being a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, a philosopher, or a dancer, even though I do all those things. Not even as a heterosexual male, or just all these different colors in the palette that are part of my experience, and I use them at different moments when I feel they're helpful. And even having been born in the capital city in Colombia, but spending some time in the jungle and in nature, I guess I have that intention to integrate the different polarities from a young age. So yeah, I don't really know how to present myself. Like when you were asking me what are 3 things I should know about you, well, yeah, I said I'm Colombian, a philosopher, dance therapist, and meditation teacher. But I am infinite, and so are you. So is everyone. Yeah?
Can identify on either of those levels, right? So there's the personal and the transpersonal. Okay. So philosopher, this is something which may sound abstract to people. I think you're the first embodiment teacher we've had on who would describe themselves as a philosopher. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, good question as well. Well, I studied philosophy as a BA, and as a teenager, I had this dream of being a writer, and I loved reading all this heavy shit and Proust and Heidegger and Dostoevsky and all those guys. I don't know why. I feel like when I was 14, I found like Karamazov Brothers or somewhere in an uncle's house, and I just got hooked into that. And then for several years, I was kind of this geek and this library mouse. And then precisely because I got into philosophy and academical study, I lost touch with my body. And while I was finishing my BA in philosophy, after spending many days trapped in the library writing my thesis, I looked outside the window and saw a tree and asked myself, when was the last time I climbed a tree?
That was what I was doing all this weekend, was climbing trees with Rafe Kelly, one of the other podcast guests, for another time. I love climbing. So that was your moment. You're in the library, you look out of the window and you go, what the fuck? I'm a clever guy. I'm reading all these books, but when was the last time I climbed a tree?
Yeah, so I realized I had lost touch with my body, and I urgently needed to dance and move and come back to that space that I had as a child, but I had kind of lost touch with. So I finished my studies in philosophy, and since then I dedicated almost all my life to dance and creativity in different ways. And after that, I went and traveled to the Amazon and did an amazing trip from Colombia to Brazil through the Amazon. And out of that came a documentary that I did after researching Afro-Brazilian dance and music. So it's on YouTube, where people can find it. It's called Magic Messengers.
Magic Messengers.
Yeah, Magic Messengers. But interesting that you asked me about philosophy, because somehow I had been kind of denying after that. I'm no longer a philosopher. I'm not interested in academic stuff, in all this abstract discourse. I want to be in body. I want to be in life. But when we met during this conference in Budapest, in Hungary, I also reconciled with my philosopher side. So it's actually cool. Also, it's also cool to, to be a library geek, and so I guess we're always making peace with different aspects of ourselves, and also enjoying the conflicts, and of course that's where growth occurs. So I'm still dancing between my background in academy, and also my passion for dance. One step forward, one step back. That's how I like it.
And it is quite common in the embodiment world to sort of people to, for me, it was psychology and reading the library in my Cambridge sixth form, and then going, okay, screw this, I'm just going to do martial arts and forget about books. And then at a certain point, that becomes dishonest. And we go, okay, well, this is part of me, actually. I want to reintegrate this. And I feel like some of that just feel is kind of 1960s and 70s style embodiment, which was quite anti-intellectual. And I wonder now if there isn't a slightly more thoughtful group of embodiment teachers coming through who are studying neuroscience or reading philosophy, or, then the integrally informed, like Bentz, who we had on the show. I wonder if there isn't a movement, not just from the heady people towards the body, but also from the body people reintegrating their intellectual side.
It's so needed. We need to grow in all directions and through all those levels. And I hang out with, right now I am in the Westin Hotel, which is a very luxurious setting in Qatar, which is a kind of a very wealthy country. And most of my colleagues are yoga teachers or fitness people. And I always try to encourage them to, just try different things, And when was the last time you went to the library, or just spend some time alone and just being quiet, or praying, or painting, or exploring other intelligences? So of course, heady people need to dance, and dancers need to think and read and write.
And self-love's one of your main things, isn't it? Don't you have a self-love project? Is this when I was kind of looking at stuff online, this is the first thing I came up with?
So I've recently created a platform where I'm creating and offering online courses around this topic, which is very broad. But that's what it's all about for me at the end of the day. How do we relate to ourselves, and from that space, how do we relate to others and the world at large? And it's very interesting because there's a lot of, everyone's talking about this, self-care and self-love, and you have to appreciate yourself and be grateful. And what I found is that that's great, that's very needed, but I'm also trying to kind of demystify that. And I think that's very close to just a blatant narcissism, which doesn't really help anyone. So I like thinking about it through the lens of David Data, who is this American author who writes a lot about integrating the masculine and the feminine. He talks about 3 stages of growth. And the first one would be this egocentric, selfish experience of love, in which you feel someone else needs to love you. The second one is this self-sufficient kind of love, when you say, I can love myself, which is where most of the kind of self-love movement or trend or information is. Like, I can love myself, I deserve love, I'm worthy, all these ideas. But then he talks about a third stage, which is selfless love, which is realizing I am love itself.
Mm.
And breathing and moving from that realization, which is our great challenge, right? Our great purpose. How do we stay aligned with that truth that we've all experienced, in different ways, whether it's on the dance floor and just letting go and being danced by this cosmic love, or whether it's just looking at a tree and also connecting to something bigger. So how can we open up those two words, self love? They're quite big, and I don't have an answer.
This is exciting. I want to jump in here because we have a self-love pose and embodied yoga, and it's always very emotional for people. And sometimes we differentiate it from self-narcissism. And, often self-love is like you're supposed to have a candlelit bubble bath every day or something. And then other people say, no, it's a bit deeper than that. It's about boundaries and how you treat yourself. Like, okay, great. But then it's almost like those two words aren't examined, and they're two of like the deepest philosophical words that exist. Like, you're talking about no self-love, this idea actually that if once you're identifying with others and the universe and everything else, it's like, okay, how is self-love when you're actually able to identify beyond the individual self, transpersonal self-love, and then the idea of like, well, what is love? I mean, this is a huge question, right? Like right away, is love, self-love, just basic self-care, or is there something a little bit deeper than that? So I want to dig more into this. This is juicy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it includes all those layers, and we kind of oscillate between those different, or at least I do, in my daily life. There are moments when I feel just like a baby, and please come, someone just give me a hug. And then I'd say my center of gravity is this very, it's kind of mature man, recognizing that he's self-sufficient emotionally, financially, etc. But then also knowing that there's further growth, and knowing that I can be of deeper service, and that I can love in deeper ways when I transcend my personal identity and my personal agenda.
I just, if I'm going to jump in there, I just offer that out to listeners. Like, how would your self-love be if you identified as love? Because, we can come from the point of view of self-love of like, I'm better or worse than other people, or like I deserve self-love or I don't, I'm worthy or I'm not. And even I'm worthy, I deserve it. It's still that same paradigm, right?
Yes.
And then there's self-love from the point of view of self-sufficiency, or from the point of view of interdependence. Like, a lot of this self-love stuff's coming from hyper-individualistic United States, and you're from much more communal culture. If you're anything like the Colombians I've met in the UK, there's an intercommunal sense of self-love here rather than the individual. Well, I'm having my bubble bath and fuck what the rest of you are doing. And then there's this transpersonal. How is it to self-love as love? I mean, that's profound. I just want to offer that out to anyone listening. Like, how would I take care of myself this evening as love?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have an answer for that. I think it's a moment-to-moment inquiry. But to have that question and to live with that question, pulsating inside, and to know that we are that, mystery, that source of joy, beauty, boundless, all these wonderful words, and that we don't really have to fear lack or contracting back into our habits of, I'm worthy of this and I need this. And whereas in truth, for me, it comes down to basic things like being kind and generous all the time, or at least 90 or 99% of the time, consciously bringing those qualities to my daily interactions. And that's a way for me to kind of imprint in my behavior, in my mind, that recognition, that knowledge. It's not about me, it's about us, and it's about this kind of deeper reality that we're accessing more and more as we, I guess, evolve as a species. Sorry, I didn't mean to become too
fucking, I brought a philosopher on the embodiment show. You know what? Normally, people can handle a little bit of love and philosophy. We're normally super all about the body. Actually, what you're talking about is super practical. Like when I work with resilience in the gay community in Moscow, I say you have to connect to self, the body, connect to community and others, and connect to some sense of the divine or to love, whatever form or frame you have for that, depending on your beliefs, culture, whatever. And I say, this is if you want to stay sane, if you want to deal with shit. And the activists I'm working with in Moscow really are dealing with a lot of crap. You know, they're on the sharp edge. Like they are the most practical things I've found for 4 years of working with those community: body, community connection, empathy with others, into resilience, and then some sense of the love or divine or the transpersonal, which isn't touched by all the personal bullshit.
Hallelujah. Very good.
So you sent me and my secretary something really juicy, Daniel, that I have to kind of, we talk the true meaning of self-love. We're starting to go there with this one here that says, James Bond, blowjobs, and the Dalai Lama. These are 3 of my favorite things. It's like you know me inside out. These are 3 of this is like that could, my biography could be called that. So I have to ask about that. What did you mean by what is the connection between James Bond, blowjobs, and the Dalai Lama?
The Holy Trinity. Well, actually, it's the title that comes from the work of David Data. It's the title of one of his talks. And I bring it out because, as we were saying at the beginning, it's important to integrate all these different dimensions: body, mind, intellect. And as we become more aware of, for instance, that dimension of we are love, it's good to have certain archetypes that we can aspire to, that we can look up to, that we can use as kind of inspiration. And as a man who's waking up to what it means to be a conscious man in this day and age, I think it's still very new. I mean, there's a lot of divine feminine and all that stuff going on, but what does it mean to become a man? And I've been working a lot with men recently, so I'm very kind of passionate about working with men. And James Bond is one of those archetypes that for me, it's really cool hero, but at the same time very vulnerable and human. He does kind of fuck up from time to time, but at the end of the day, he nails it, and he's kind of this archetype of impeccable.
He's cool, calm, and collected, right? Like Data taught him. We had Michaela Boehm, who's one of Data's top students. If people want to look her up, but I mean, about the hot and the cool. So, the kind of feminine is always the hot and the wild, and the masculine as a kind of stereotyped almost by Bond is that whatever happens, he's cool. He's always got a one-liner. He's never panicked. There could be bullets flying and he's super cool, but obviously the dark side of that, he's kind of a psychopath as well, right? He's a kind of cold, sometimes womanizing killer as well, right? Like that's the dark side of the Bond archetype.
The way I see it, James Bond can be a great archetype to look up to, in terms of living an impeccable life. Knowing that behind the scenes he goofs, and sometimes he drops the gun, but at the end of the day, he's not gonna get you shot, and that's the main thing. And at the end of the day, he is gonna have also this steamy, hot, sex scene with this beautiful woman. So I think it's a kind of an archetype that crystallizes all the more kind of old school archetypes of the warrior, the sage, the magician, the lover. And
these archetypes,
I feel.
Sorry, after you, Daniel.
Yeah, I feel that James Bond crystallizes, and And just, yeah, it's an invitation, you know, for men. Wake up and imagine you're James Bond, or whatever version of James Bond resonates with you.
This could be triggering to people, right? They're going to say, yeah, but James Bond, he's a bad guy. You know, like, I'm pretty sure the next Bond is going to be, you know, like a lesbian woman or something. Like there's a way in which the world's trying to kill that archetype. Or in Star Wars, the archetype is Han Solo, right? So he's like the bad boy. He's kind of like space drug dealer. And I used to really relate to Han Solo and not so much squeaky clean Luke, which is another kind of archetype of the seeker, another masculine archetype. I was watching the new Star Wars and then Han Solo gets killed in it. I'm like, this is what the world's doing to the bad boy of the masculine right now. They're literally killing him. And like, for me, it was like, shit. Because it's like, if we only allow that sort of squeaky clean Luke.
No.
If listeners don't watch Star Wars, then fuck you. You should know these things. But like Luke is like the squeaky clean one, and Han is like the slightly rough bad boy. He kind of kisses the girl kind of thing. And he's literally killed off in the modern movies. And his replacement, Poe Dameron, who's another sort of bad boy, he gets like firmly put in his place by the female leaders in the new ones. And I'm like, this is problematic if that kind of strong, slightly dangerous masculine is no longer allowed.
Yeah, we're doomed. If the bad boys are gone, it's not going to be fun. We need that rough, creative energy.
I did have a moment. I work in Moscow quite a lot, and at one point I was getting paid in cash, and a beautiful woman, I was right by Red Square in a cafe, and a beautiful woman was passing a briefcase full of money under the table towards me. And I did have this moment of like, oh my God, this is my James Bond boyhood fantasy. Somehow that archetype had got in me in the same way as the Star Wars ones had led me to do Aikido, which is what a lot of the Star Wars philosophy is based on. So these archetypes that we have, they do get under our skin, I would say, in different ways, you know?
Yeah. And then the second pillar of the Trinity is the blowjobs, which for me, well, the pleasure of giving, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, or you identify with any of those. And again, this is referring to David Data's work. He talks a lot about like entering the world as if the whole world was giving you a blowjob, or as if you were penetrating the world with your strength and creative juiciness and purpose and all this. So tapping into that sexual energy and using it for our work, for our family life. For I work with children. I work at a hospital here for children with special needs. I'm tapping into my sexual energy all the time without being a psychopath. But that's such a deep reservoir of energy that we're not really aware of.
So just to be clear, you're saying there's a sort of sexual energy of reservoir that you can tune into. And this doesn't mean you're like acting out from there or doing anything inappropriate with the children, of course. It just means that you're tuning into a certain way of being that's energizing you.
Yeah. And to recover the basic delight of being alive, which is so graphically depicted in the image of a blowjob.
Nice. I don't think we talk about blowjobs nearly enough on this show.
What are your thoughts about it, Mark?
I think that's a powerful image is to imagine receiving oral sex from the world. Another one is, I have is the image of, I might just be walking down the street, or particularly if I'm walking to do something, like I'm walking to work, the image of sort of actually being a cock penetrating life as if it were a vagina, and life kind of opening up in front of me. I find that visualization, particularly when I'm in that sort of masculine doing mode, and I invite listeners, male or female, to try this as a visualization, to actually have a felt sense of that and visualize it. Can be a tremendously powerful way of going about life.
Yeah, it's a game changer, and a very juicy one, to learn to expand that understanding of sex beyond the genital and into the world.
And how's that going down, so to speak, in Qatar? I mean, there's one thing, I being around the expressive sexuality of Brazilians or the contained potential volcano of Colombians. But I mean, I had a Colombian girlfriend, and she was always like this sense of like contained passion. She's like, in my country, there are oranges as big as your head, and when you eat them, the juice runs down your breast. She would always like, all the tango is that feeling before you have sex. It's like you're about to jump on each other, and Brazil is like you're already fucking each other.
Yeah,
they're all flavors of passion, whether it's contained or expressed or about to happen or during happening. How's that going down in Qatar?
Well, there's a lot of repressed sexual energy that is coming out in healthy and unhealthy ways.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are really high rates of, depression and people being addicted to medications, and then all this taboo around substances and sexuality. It's really, it's just very sad. But on the other side, there's also a lot of art and creativity coming up. And I mean, they've signed up to run the FIFA World Cup in 4 years. So they have literally created a stadium that looks like a giant pussy.
Do they know that? I mean, is this...
Well, they weren't aware at the beginning, but somehow it was allowed, and it's there. I mean, it's not finished yet, but it's like this. So they're calling it in.
It's interesting.
They're calling it in.
I've spent some time in Dubai, and I'm going to be teaching there again soon. And there's all these phallic objects pushing into the sky out of the desert, And then there's all this repressed sexuality, and it's come out in some really dark ways in Dubai. Like Les was a family incest, and kind of, I hear some really dark stories when I'm in Dubai about what happens to that repressed sexuality there. And it's on the surface is one thing and underneath another. And it seems like Qatar's a little healthier. But, the other one that reminds me of is I've just come from Moscow, where they've just had the World Cup. And this was a huge sexual opening for the women of Moscow. So in Moscow, it's sort of there's more women than men. And men are particularly bad lovers by many accounts there, by many of the accounts of various lovers I've had, and female friends complain. Not every man, I'm sure, but many. And what happened is during the World Cup, loads of Latin men were there from Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. And they gave the whole city this sexual awakening to the point where there was like Russians on TV saying, please do not sleep with the foreign guys. It is a national disgrace. And all my friends are like sending me little flags every day of all the men they've danced with or kissed or fucked. I was just getting these little Brazilian flags or Mexican flags hitting my phone every day from my female friends there. And it was like the World Cup had this huge sexual opening for the country.
Well, it's bound to happen. And it's a big celebration. And it should be, across all those domains, I guess. And I mean, it's going to be a really quick and perhaps shocking leap for a country like Qatar. But it's what they've signed up for, and it's happening. It's shocking, because of course there's a lot of conflict in the younger local generations, and I work a lot with one-to-one clients, and both female and male, and they have to, they just can't stop lying to themselves.
We've talked a bit about sex. We should probably talk about death as the only other interesting subject. So, death as a teacher, this is how you put it to me before. What do you mean by that? What do you mean death as a teacher? Well,
the main reason why I ended up getting interested in spirituality and the sacredness of life through dance and through the kind of work I do is basically because I survived 2 near-death experiences. I was stabbed once in Colombia in the back while I was running my bicycle in Bogota, just visiting a friend in the evening, and some guy was gonna mug me, and he ended up stabbing me with a screwdriver and piercing my lung. And miraculously, I was saved by two angels who came out of nowhere in a shop in Bogota, and they took me to their hospital. They were two interns who had just taken a break from their shift at the hospital, and if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here, because it was a very delicate wound, basically a respiratory attack if it's untreated after 20 or 30 minutes. So after that, I survived, and then I realized, wow, I'm breathing. It's pretty amazing. And if I'm here, I don't know if it's just the narrative of survivors who create new meaning in their lives, but for me it was very real to feel the sacredness of life, and to feel the proximity of death, and to receive that as an amazing medicine and an amazing teacher saying, hey, wake up and don't take this for granted. This is a precious gift. Each day is a precious gift. Don't buy into the mechanics of it, you know. And by becoming more intimate with death, we can become more alive and enjoy life and celebrate it, and connect more with ourselves and with others. So, oh, well, it's a big topic.
No, I'm with you on this, though, man. I presence death in every workshop I do. I say, today you're going to get 8 hours closer to your death. How are we going to use that time? Mm-hmm. And then everyone laughs, and then I kind of just don't laugh and just look at people, and they realize I'm serious. And some courses we do more formal death meditations. We just did one. We went out of the yoga studio a couple of weekends ago and just sat on the hills outside Brighton as the sun was setting over the cemetery. So we're right by the biggest cemetery in town. And we got people to write their obituaries, which is kind of a classic exercise in personal growth, but one of a classic for a reason, I would say. And to reflect upon like why they were doing this course and what meaning it really had to them. And then people just walk quietly back, to the yoga studio before we finished the day. And the next day we had a pleasure evening where it was like food and massage and good dancing and, kind of the other side of things. But it really added something to the whole experience, that meditation.
Yeah. I mean, we still have, it's an endless opening to the full spectrum of life. But, well, as a culture, we've been running away from death for so long. And we have a lot to learn from other cultures which have a more intimate relationship with it, and to know that at the end of the day, well, this body will cease, but something persists. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
What do you, for listeners out there who are maybe, some may be uncomfortably close to death, like they've lost a loved one recently, but many of us in the Western world, a few years can go by before any kind of realization of it, because of the kind of the gifts of purpose and gratitude and presence. These are the main gift and love. These are the main gifts I find with closeness to death from a robust, mature perspective, not if you're not robust. Any tips for people getting in contact with that out there?
Well, the only tip I can think of is, if death was this scary monster, heading your way, the only appropriate response is to open up your arms and hug it, and as corny as it may sound, say thank you, I love you, and I trust you. And when those magic words are said, well, something shifts and fear disappears. And that's where true freedom comes.
Talked about football, blowjobs, sex, death. Covering some ground here, man.
It's great. I'm loving
it. So how does all this fit in a yoga context? Let's bring it right down to the kind of practice level. So we're talking philosophy and, abstract visualizations maybe. How do you bring to life some of this South American puma juiciness in an actual dance class or a yoga class?
Well, there's something about like direct transmission of energy um, that I try to work with. I don't really like to talk about too much about myself, like my personal history, unless I'm in the context of an interview like this. Um, but to know that those energies are available, and even if we're just doing a basic yoga sequence, to know that that sweetness, that humor, that love, also that um, explosiveness, whatever, is in me and in the space and is in us. um, so it depends on the audience, of course, and if they're ready to explore different ways into a yoga pose. Well, um, how can you, yeah, how can you dance your way uh, into the dancer's pose without it being this rigid, mummified Instagram addiction? Or um, it depends on the audience, to be honest. Not everyone's ready for certain things. Not everyone's interested in certain things. So um, I also keep it very, very practical. But I've been successful hearing people appreciate my work. I feel because I bring this kind of other, yeah, humor, sweetness, joy that is not that common in, I guess, in maybe other yoga teachers here, many from Europe or from other places who might not have cultivated those qualities in themselves yet. So, um, yeah, but I do believe in the potential of a direct transmission. And I mean, I don't consider myself an enlightened master or anything like that, but if you've ever been in presence of a great master, you know that it's kind of their energetical snowball or something they're carrying, and they're transmitting that to their students and wherever they go.
Felt sweetness a couple of times. I know on the message you sent me before, you talked about innocence. These are quite
Yes.
unusual kind of qualities to hear someone
Mm.
in this field talk about, like sweetness and innocence.
Yes. Well, yeah, things like, being grateful and all this inspirational quotes about the importance of having I don't know, a gratitude diary. That's great, but I feel that it can also become very just mechanical and boring, and lose its juiciness unless we recover two qualities. One is innocence, which is the recognition that I don't really know anything, and that I'm waking up to this moment with fresh eyes. And I got that from some of my meditation teachers in Thailand, some of the Buddhist monks there, advanced practitioners. They've been meditating their whole lives. They go on this, advanced retreats, and I asked them, so what's the main tip you give me? And just imagine it's the first time you're meditating, because it is. It always is, isn't it? Imagine this is your first interview. And of course, you already have that openness, but that's something that we lose in our, and repetition and work and this and that. And so how can we cultivate innocence and radical freshness in our sometimes boring routines? And of course, routines are needed. Routines are basic, to provide a structure for growth. But innocence, and yeah, being in awe, wonder, feeling curious for everything every day. It's something I try to cultivate, and it works very well for me. I don't know, even when disasters happen, I'm just like, I don't know, like, let's open up our eyes and see what's going on here. Like all these details, all this, and it just shifts. It's just a perception, isn't it? But it kind of shifts everything. And then the other quality is devotion, which I would say is, if we could upgrade, gratitude. because it's easy to say thank you, or I'm grateful for this, I appreciate. I am grateful for this lovely hotel I'm in, where I'm going to give my yoga class, and the lovely staff who have accommodated me here. And that's kind of easy to say, but can you cultivate devotion towards all this and say, I adore this hotel. This is a temple, and the people who are serving me, they're royalty, and I bow at their feet because they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a perception, but it shifts everything. Even if you're living in a shithole, say, I adore my body. I adore.
So not just self-care, but actually self-devotion in terms of how we relate to our body. And then, I remember in one relationship, I had an old Aikido instructor who'd been married for about 50 years. And they, his funeral, someone said, he's devoted to his wife. And it's actually a very powerful thing to say, that someone's devoted to another human being, and very beautiful. And I tried to approach my spouse that way, and my own body and my work that way, with a sense of devotional quality. It's more than just like, hey, this person's cool, or I'm okay, I should look after my body. But it's like, why not take it one more step to that devotional? I can certainly understand what you say about innocence. I remember when I first started Aikido 20 years ago, there was one of my first classes, and there was this old guy who was like teaching me something, and he said, it's your first month of Aikido. He's like, I'd do anything to make this my first month. He's like, I wish I could be where you are now. And I thought, that's crazy. This guy's a black belt. He's got all this skill. He can kick my ass. He's got all this status and prestige in the club. But I could see he was telling the truth. He was genuinely saying, I would do anything to look at Aikido with your eyes. Because even though he was trying to have that innocence, it's always kind of a trick, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's such a powerful feeling when you're literally in awe. And I mean, if we do forget about it, it does kind of become a bit fake, but we can still, it's just a practice as any other. Beginner's mind.
Okay, so beginner's mind may be a good place to end. So 2 things to finish. Where can people find out more about you? I kind of found it a little bit tricky. I found your Instagram, which is Daniel.healingmeditation, right?
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram, Daniel.healingmeditation, or on my website, danielmatallana.com.
And do you have a final message about the body?
It's the Wonderland, and we are inside Alice's head, and it's our playground. The body is our playground, our temple, our juiciest vehicle. So let's adore it and celebrate it and look after it. Daniel, you're my favorite sexy jungle kitty. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, my friend. That first impression remains, and I hope we meet in some other jacuzzi. Subscribe to get more. And you can also leave us a review on iTunes, which helps with our rankings. So really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support the podcast even more, then fund us. Go to Patreon. Give us $1 per episode. Those who don't know, Patreon's a really good way of supporting things you want to see more of in the world. I know so much is available for free now, and what I'd say is a lot of energy and effort goes into this podcast. I put it out there for free so everyone can get it. More than I work on this. Everyone that wants it can have it for free. And if you want to support us, it is really appreciated. So it's patreon.com/Mark Walsh. And of course, if you want any in-person training, you can visit embodiedfacilitator.com. There's loads more resources there too.
Till next time, welcome home to the body.